few Sundays back, I was at the new Mayor, Kay Wesley's parade and celebration at the town hall. While I was there, one of the people that was contributing to that really amazing event was Deborah Lawson. What distinguishes Deborah from you or I is the fact that she spends a lot of her life in a super adapted chariot to give her mobility. She is the chair of the Equal Access Advisory Group, which has been set up to help people understand how disability affects their lives, and possibly more importantly, to give them the tools to help those people to have as normal a life as possible. Deborah is an amazing champion. She has a will which is quite phenomenal. I honestly believe that to her nothing is impossible. She doesn't view disability as a limiting thing. She simply views disability as something which provides different challenges to the challenges that you possibly or I face on a daily basis. To some extent, I discovered these challenges after trying to lay some new flooring in my house. I got up this morning and it was all I could do to have my wife to sort of lever me out of bed and get me into a vertical position. It reminds us that sometimes disability is life-changing. Deborah, lovely to meet you today.
And you.
What we're hoping to do in this series is to give you a platform within which you can talk about the work that you are doing on behalf of everybody in Congleton, but principally with the Town Council, to help people's awareness of disability in the way in which it affects people's lives, but also the way in which they can be, as I said before, properly equipped to assist and have the toolkit, if you like, for people they meet. Tell us a little bit about your campaign.
Okay, well, I was contacted by Congleton Town Council last year, and they were interested in ways that they could become more accessible and understand more about disabled people's needs. With that, I wrote a report. I went and talked to a lot of local residents, found out the problems that some of them were having, and took this to the council. And they were really impressed, but also really shocked. A lot of things that they hadn't thought about. And with that information, they decided that we needed to actually do a lot more. And the group was formed, which they asked me to chair. And they asked various different people with lived experience or who were experts in different conditions to join it, so we could help the entire of Congleton raise awareness and become better equipped really as a council to do better. And they've been fantastic. They have held their hands up, and on a lot of it they've said these things that they've never thought of. And that attitude is wonderful, because with that attitude you can do so much, because there's no resistance from them. They're just open to learn, which is wonderful. You know, I've been really, really impressed with them.
I guess in the same way that the good people of Congleton
Yes.
will be quite shocked about the impact that disability has, and the aim of your campaign really is to help them have a better understanding, and help them to perhaps adapt their own behaviour, or even join you in your campaign. Because many voices make light work, you might say.
Absolutely. I mean, I found that when I became disabled, so I've seen it from both sides. I became disabled in my teens.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a real shock for me, because it was like I was living a different life all of a sudden. And at first it was completely overwhelming. Every time I went out I cried because I couldn't do anything. People treated me differently. And then I got to realise that actually this is something that thousands of people are experiencing, and it's something that's hidden in plain sight. You know, it's something that is right in front of us all, but unless it actually affects you, we don't notice. And I felt that was very wrong. And I felt that, you know, even as a teenager, I thought, no, we all need to become aware, and if we all help and we all know what people's struggles are, we could change it, because barriers are all constructed. So in my opinion, they can all be deconstructed and dismantled.
Yes, the barriers are constructed either inadvertently or advertently in some cases.
Absolutely, whether that's steps, attitudes. Yeah.
So, if you don't mind telling us, what was the situation before your disability and how did things change?
So I was just a normal teenager, going about my lives, planning on going to university, different things, and I had a number of things happen to me, one being a serious car accident where the seat failed to lock and it sent me into the dashboard. And so then I lost my mobility, and things changed quite dramatically. My life path changed dramatically. I still went to university, but some years later. And just before that happened, I had another accident, which meant that I couldn't actually sit for a number of years. I could only lie down. So I still did a degree, but I did it on my back with a screen above my head.
And I think we should shout a little bit about this. You didn't just get any old degree, did you?
No, I didn't, no. I got a degree in counter fraud and criminal justice.
And at what level?
First class honours.
Oh, so that is no mean achievement, is it? It really isn't.
Yeah, it was
and you had your disability during this time. You had a lot of the physical discomfort which came with that.
Yeah, and it was very challenging because I'm on a lot of medication because of the pain I'm in. So I did a lot of falling asleep trying to study, you know. But yeah, it took 5 years. But I did it.
But you did it.
I did it, and I was even more proud because I'd done it. And I think, to be honest, originally I wouldn't have attempted such a tricky degree, but I really wanted to push myself and kind of prove that I could do it. So I think that in that way it was it was interesting because I absolutely wouldn't have done the same degree that I chose.
It's also interesting in the sense that we tend to see the disability or notice the disability. In some instances that can be particularly disturbing for the individual with that disability because we may have a tendency to stare, to
absolutely
pick out that person in the street. Why are they in a wheelchair? Why are they having to push a trolley in front of them in order to get along the street? Why are they being so damn slow waiting to cross the road and I want to get on with my car journey? That sort of thing. But inside that person there is a will, there is a mind, there is a personality, there is everything which was there before.
I think this is it. I think society has a lot of unconscious bias to everything that is perceived as slightly different. And that is quite troubling. Things like that need breaking down because the way I always see it is if you break your leg, people just see you as a person with a broken leg. If you are permanently disabled, suddenly people see you as somebody very different and they don't realise that you can still achieve, you can still do what they can do, you can do more sometimes than they can do. And there's that judgment and that lack of awareness is something that needs breaking down because it has become a real problem, I think. When people sort of realise, I'm one of the highest qualified fraud specialists in the world with the qualifications I got, and people were like, "Oh wow, really?" And it's like, "Well, why would a wheelchair stop that?" It's that sort of judgment definitely needs changing really in society.
And that's partly a sort of inbuilt reaction. You're different to me. And it's also partly a lack of awareness of the way in which a particular disability will impact on their life, on their psychology, and also on themselves.
I think that's it. I mean, I think the media play a really unhealthy part in that. You think about the different things we see on TV. You've got Tiny Tim, so the charity model of disability, where they must be pitted, they must be, even to things like Disney movies, Captain Hook, well, he's disabled, but he must be a villain. And all these things, they do actually have quite an impact on people as they grow up. And they have these wrong assumptions of people because they don't even notice that it is things that have been fed to them in fairy tales, things like that, or in films. And it's about learning that actually they're man-made things, they're constructed, that we've just been taught the wrong thing. And learning, even in the newspapers, you know, they tend to depict disability as either superheroes with the Paralympians or scroungers, and there's nothing in between, and it's absolutely ridiculous. It's so wrong. And I think that's where now a lot of people, and at the council as well, we're all looking at the social model of disability, which is that society is disabling people, you know, that it's not the people's impairments as such that are disabling people, it's the barriers that have been put in our way. That can be the attitudes, that can be the physical barriers. And it's about realising that actually other people can take responsibility for it, because I certainly didn't build the steps to a shop. Somebody else has done that, and by doing that they've excluded so many people. And if they actually got rid of it and put a ramp, everybody could get in. So we over the sort of centuries have disabled people. Yet I think a lot of people are seeing it as the person with the impairment, that it's their problem, but actually it's everybody's problem because we've created that society.
So let's now take listeners on a journey. You're coming down into Congleton Centre, you're on your super chariot, so everybody can notice you.
Yeah.
You don't need flashing lights on the back of it because you're not on the road.
Yeah.
Which in itself frightens the living daylights out of me, that these
Yeah.
rather frail vehicles going along the road and sometimes don't even have a flashing light to indicate.
Yeah.
And alarmingly, sometimes the people in them wear dark clothing, nothing visible.
Yeah.
But that's not the instance for you. There you are in your super chariot. You're going along the main street. What sort of issues do you see that probably I wouldn't notice?
So there's an awful lot. It can go from crowds of people that won't see or hear you if you're behind them. They can step back into you and actually fall on top of you. There is A-boards that are all over the place, so they block your way, and it can be that then you can't get round either side. It's even down to the fact that there's little pavements down the side of the high street either side that really didn't need to be there. They should have all been completely flat because they are hazardous to wheelchairs, people with mobility difficulties, people who are visually impaired. If I would like to go into a shop, I can't. The majority of the shops in Congleton, apart from the big ones, things like Specsavers are good, and you know, the doors are too narrow. They have steps going up into them. I have asked some shops for ramps. They've said that they can't actually do a ramp because the high street was made sloped. This isn't actually true. They've just not researched it. There is actually ramps they could use that have got slightly different feet on at the bottom, but they've not looked into it. And then you've got the fact that the shops are so small. If you wanted to go in, you couldn't because your chair wouldn't fit anyway. And I'm only a slim woman, and if my chair can't fit, nobody's chair can fit, you know, and that's pretty sad, really.
Which actually denies you an awful lot of things which people consider was fundamental to life.
Absolutely, it should be a fundamental right that you can go shopping.
What about supermarkets? Less for you, but for people with perhaps visual impairment, this obsession supermarkets have, and we understand why, of moving the products from aisle C to aisle F.
Absolutely, and even the things on the shelves, they're so small. I have a very mild visual impairment. I see double vision because I've got some cornea abnormalities, and I can't read what's on the shelves. I have to go right up to them to try to see. And then if they've moved them, and I try to figure out where they've moved them to, I can't see the signs above the aisles. And if my visual impairment is mild, for somebody else who has a much more severe visual impairment, it must just be completely overwhelming for them to navigate, you know. And I think as well with visual impairment, a lot of the time people don't know, so there's no understanding. They're not patient, they're not ready to help, things like that. And it makes it very, very challenging. Things like when they put their big things with boxes in them, I can't think what they're called, and they block the aisles with them. That's a problem for wheelchairs. It's a problem for people who are visually impaired. and you can't get round. But as well, nobody can sort of, if you're in a wheelchair, nobody can see you. They can't hear you that you're saying, excuse me, you know, you feel very invisible.
Indeed.
So yeah, it is very, very hazardous. So even the bigger places that you think, oh, well, this would be much better, there's still a lack of awareness.
And I mean, I guess we should say in fairness to supermarkets that a lot of the larger ones will, if you ask, then happily send somebody around with you to assist you. But in a way, that in itself, as nice as it is not really the answer, is it?
Absolutely, because you want to be independent. You know, every grown-up deserves to have that independence. I know that to the town council, we ran a survey and we asked everybody with disabilities to answer it and to tell us their challenges. And a lot of it was very repetitive of the same issues, and a lot of it was quite sad as well for what people were struggling with. But it was even things like they would arrive to a supermarket and they would think they could then rent the scooter to go around and it wouldn't be charged. So then they couldn't do their shopping and they had to go back home. And it's things that a lot of people would never even think about. And it's about raising that awareness. It's about, you know, just thinking that little bit more can make such an impact on somebody's life.
We're talking in the generality at the moment about the word disability.
Yeah.
At least in terms of the features that we hope to run now on Congleton Radio, we probably need to define that a little, or at least constrain that a little bit. We're principally talking about the impact of physical disability, whether that's mobility, sight, hearing, possibly smell even, you know, rather than any form of disability which comes about due to mental state.
Yeah.
Within that, you've outlined the issues that you would face in your super chariot. What about somebody who was visually impaired?
So there is a lot of overlap with visual impairment and wheelchair users. For example, as we all know, Congleton's covered in potholes. That can be very difficult for somebody with a visual impairment. They may not see it. They may be unable to work out the depth of it because they have perception difficulties. And they can cause themselves an injury, whereas somebody in a wheelchair, their wheelchair can tip up, you know, or someone in a scooter and they can tip into the road from it. The same with the A-boards, for example, and the street furniture. You know, they might not be able to get around it. They may not have enough vision to even see that that's coming up. And it's hazardous. It really is hazardous. And as well, you know, there are rules for A-boards that the council have. But I've seen a lot of the shops, I don't think they're even that aware of those rules to keep them in certain areas or to not block pavements with them, things like that. And there is just an overall lack of awareness. Things like bins on pavements are really hazardous to people because they just get left staggered all over the pavement, which then forces people into the road. People with visual impairment are going to fall on them, they're going to bang into them and not see them. People in a wheelchair, well, they're going to have to try to find a drop curb, and then you'll go to the drop curb and somebody will be parked over it, and you'll be trapped and you'll think, where do I go? You know, you can't push a bin when you're sort of sat down. A lot of the time people who are wheelchair users have got all sorts of bone or pain problems, so they wouldn't have the energy to or the strength to move them. And you know, and then if there is a garden before the house, you couldn't go and knock on the door because you can't get into somebody's garden to even say, excuse me, could you move your car off this drop curb? Excuse me, do you think you could move your bin? So it leaves you needing to be with somebody all the time when you go out, which really in 2024 nobody should need that.
Nor do you wish it particularly.
Not absolutely.
No. The thing that's been given quite a bit of prominence recently is the issue of parking. We do it because we think our vehicle's going to be a little bit safer, and also because in a way we're trying to be considerate to other motor vehicles that are passing by. We're giving them a little bit more space if it's a narrow lane. But that's the pavement. You're not going to be of choice going up the road. Pavement is your motorway.
Exactly.
And yet, suddenly, not only you've got the drop curve to contend with, but basically you've got to go off of the pavement, round the vehicle, on the road.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
Very dangerous indeed. And it's a bit of a thing of mine, I must admit. People know the accelerator is on the right foot. They don't really understand how to just ease off it and slow down when they see an obstacle in the road, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It is, because as well, if I was to have to come from behind a parked car, I am often lower than the parked car, so people don't see me. And as well, I think drivers, they are so busy looking at everything else, all the other hazards, they're not ready for somebody who is lower down. If I'm out with my husband, immediately people spot us. If I'm not, it would be incredibly dangerous. And it's the same, so if they park on the pavement, they are also damaging the pavement, and the pavements then end up becoming cracked and broken, which affects wheelchair users. It affects
I'll correct you there, more cracked and broken.
Well, absolutely, yeah, I would agree with that. But then that also becomes really dangerous for somebody with a visual impairment, because they don't see that, so they lose their footing. It is a huge problem, it really is.
I hope we're giving listeners a taste of the issues. Because of these issues and because of the situation you find yourself in, you were invited to become the chair of the Equal Access Advisory Group. What campaign successes have they had, and what are they currently campaigning upon?
So when we started the group up earlier in the year, we, as I mentioned earlier, we did a survey and put it out to Congleton, asked as many people as we could to fill this survey out so we could get the feedback and we could figure out all the different areas that people were struggling with. That was events, town centre, every different area you could think of that got brought up. Then every meeting we have, we look at every sort of area. So the last one we had was events. We invited all the different people who run the events to the meeting. I did a very big report for them on how to make events safer, how to consider more people. And then they go ahead and then they do what's suggested. And, you know, for example, it's been the Food and Drink Festival, and Jackie at the council, she told me the different things that they'd done. They'd created a quiet space for people who are neurodivergent. People that find crowds too difficult to navigate, or they need sort of more peace and quiet, they were invited to come earlier before it opened, so they could go around safely. They were able to ask volunteers for help so they could get around more easily, because it could be quite frightening. So different things get implemented depending on what the event is, and it's already having quite an impact. There is sort of challenges because a lot of what was brought up is Cheshire East's responsibility. But the council, Congleton Town Council, is still going to lobby them to see what it is that they can still sort of do, you know. But they've been fantastic in doing so. They're really trying to make things more accessible for Congleton residents.
It almost fits in with Kay Wesley's theme, doesn't it?
It absolutely
it's inclusivity.
does. Yeah.
And that includes people with some form of disability as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think we're really lucky to have a mayor like that who believes in inclusivity.
Indeed. So we all know that Cheshire East is facing challenging times at the moment.
Yes.
What sort of response do you get? It will be unkind possibly to think that the response you get is, well, I'm very sorry, yes, you've got a really good case there, but this is impossible, we've got bigger fish to fry.
I have submitted every report that I've been given by people of dangerous areas, apart from the fact that grass and things like that, hedges were overhung, they got knocked back, which was quite infuriating really. Some aspects where the pavement grading was dangerous and people were hurting themselves, we got a response that, well, they couldn't see a problem. Which
they obviously had a disability if they couldn't see a problem.
Absolutely that. I think that is the issue with a lot of highways, is that the people assessing it are non-disabled, so they need guidance from people with disabilities so they can understand it. Something that our Mayor Kay and Jackie at the council are very keen to do is rent wheelchairs and things like that for councillors, and take them around some of the difficult areas so they can actually understand firsthand, you know, go and do this task, go to this shop. You can't, because I think it's about raising awareness and trying to improve the situation, because if people don't understand just from verbally being told, they literally need to try it out to see how they would navigate the space. Because as I said, when I became disabled, it was things I didn't notice. I'm a very compassionate person, But I still didn't notice those things till I was in that situation. And I was quite shocked, really, that the school hadn't taught me things like that. There was nothing in the curriculum that opened my eyes to anything like that, you know. And I think if we can start, you know, from schooling, it would make a big difference.
I'm sure it would. There's almost the need to say, right, today, kids, you're going to have some form of artificial disability imposed on you for a short time, so that you suddenly realise, I hadn't realised that life was like that for so many people. And we are talking about a large number of people at the end of the day, aren't we?
Yeah, this is it. 1 in 4 people have a disability as defined under the Equality Act. So, you know, that's sort of, it's 24% of the UK. So people that you meet every day, you won't realise that they might have a hidden disability. And it's something that is affecting so many people, because if you're not disabled yourself, you might have a family member or a friend that is disabled. It's always going to be in your life, and if everybody thought about it, it would make a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, by extrapolation, and let's be generous, that's 1 in 5 in Congleton.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Well, actually, we think it's higher in Congleton. I was looking at the figures this week, and I think we worked it out that it was about 23% of people in Congleton. But we think it's higher because of older people who perhaps don't see the fact that they're now struggling with mobility and things as a disability. They just see it as, well, it's a bit of old age, it's what to be expected. So they're not actually marking down on census forms that it is a disability. So I actually think it's higher. I think wherever there's an older population, we should be even more considerate of sort of the town and the people that we have in here.
You just reminded me of something I heard a few years back. Grange-over-Sands is one of the famous retirement spots for elderly people in the Lake District.
Right.
The very nature of the Lake District is that it's hilly.
Yes.
But for some reason, these people sort of come to Grange-over-Sands and they want to view the sea. So increasingly they choose, if they're lucky, a bungalow, but otherwise a house which has got that view of the sea, which is right at the top of the hill, only to find that after a few years it is physically exceedingly difficult to get down to the shops at the bottom of the hill. It's even more difficult to get back up, probably without a bus service.
I completely agree, and I think that's the problem with semi-rural living. I had a best friend who lived in London and things were a lot easier for him, and he was always horrified how difficult they were here. I would say Congleton's especially difficult for accessibility. A lot of the time you want to live in a semi-rural area because it's quieter, it's more peaceful. I've been finding the people of Congleton are lovely. I think it's an especially friendly town, but it's an especially inaccessible town, and that is a real challenge. We came from Macclesfield, which was marginally better. When I came here, I spoke to a neighbour and who had been disabled all her life, and I said, you know, what's the score with the shops, you know? And she says, but we have about 3 or 4 we can go in, so isn't that great, you know? And as I obviously hadn't always been disabled, my opinion was absolutely not. You know, that's not a good thing. You know, we should be saying, well, we can come in all of them, we can go into every shop. So I think that as well, it can be quite sad, because I think that disabled people, even the older generation, they can sort of think, well, I can't do that anymore, okay, well, I just won't. And it should be more that we're looking at things thinking, why? You know, age, disability, anything like that, we are all equal, and we all need to have equal access to everywhere, you know.
Let's change the perspective a little bit, because we talked generally about urban issues.
Yeah.
Anybody with a disability loves to get out into the fabulous countryside which we have around us. The challenges there will be even more difficult than they are in towns. Can you give me a few examples of the sorts of things which are a challenge, and also what could be done about some of them?
So I would love to go out in the countryside. I find it peaceful. My chair only has an 18mm ground clearance, so that means that unless somewhere's paved, I can't pretty much go anywhere.
That makes it a Formula One chair, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. But you need a sort of an off-road chair. Well, unless you have a lot of money, you have a specialist big van to transport that, or a big trailer, you have a big garage to keep chairs in, you can't use that. So you are when we go, we often have to just park up and look at it from the car, which completely robs you of that experience. I would say Aspermere is very, very good. Their paving could be a little bit smoother, but I think they've done the best with what they've got. They have an accessible toilet on site, and I kind of think if somewhere like Aspermere can do it, then I think a lot of places could do better. They could provide these pathways, they could improve things. And also, the majority, I think it's 91%-ish of disabled people will check before they go for accessible information about a place. And if the place doesn't advertise as being accessible, people presume that it's not. So you are losing what's called the purple pound, which is millions and millions every single year of revenue that people are... shops are not tapping into, so it's the same with the town centre. They are missing, if you think, a quarter at least, but probably more, because my husband will not go into a shop that's not accessible. He says, right, if my wife can't go in, you're not having my business. So if everybody's family thinks the same, you could easily be talking about 60% of the population are not using your business just because of the inaccessibility.
Why a purple pound?
So purple is the colour of disability.
Didn't know that.
So there's things like Purple Sock Day. So once a year, people wear purple socks to represent disability, things like that. But I can't remember the exact figures, but it's huge. The amount of money that businesses, are losing now because they're just simply not accessible.
Just briefly going back to the rural situation and Cheshire East.
Yeah.
One of the things which, in a sense, has improved accessibility for many people was the construction of the link road.
Yeah.
It has wide cycleways. It has slopes down from the adjacent footpath down to the main cycleway itself. And we also have increasingly intact and ready to be used what's termed the West-East Greenway. This is a major plan. It was going to cross the River Dane, but for cost reasons I think we've lost that. But all the developers on that route are being required to put in a vehicle segregated, pleasant, recreational way which will go certainly from the River Dane right the way through to Manchester Road and probably beyond that. That's working at the moment. Have you ever been invited to sort of comment on the details of that?
Never. No, never. I have helped thousands of businesses and organisations. I've been doing this for 20 years. I probably shouldn't do this, but Cheshire East are not very receptive to getting outside sort of expert advice on things. And it's a great shame. It is a great shame because I think sometimes even with the smallest of tweaks, things could be improved. And very cost effective as well. A lot of things, even sort of, well, if you're building something, move the entrance here to there. One example is my home is not big enough for me after we had a house fire 8 years ago, and I was moved to a home half the size, and it needs adapting, but constantly Cheshire East keep looking. They're all non-disabled. They keep looking how to adapt it. I keep coming back to them and saying, I can't use my wheelchair in this plan, and they won't take my opinion on board. But I'm the user and I'm the expert because I have lived experience. So I think that we would call that the medical model of disability, where services, hospitals, they see that they're the experts and disabled people are not. And I think we need to reframe that. And if we started to realise actually the experts are the people with a lived experience, we could really improve things. And that goes for any service, for the environment rurally. If like the council have very much sort of said it's so important that we have people with lived experience to give us their input. And with that, they are taking it on board. To me, that can be a blueprint for other councils to follow, because I think what Congleton Council are doing is brilliant. It really is. And I just hope one day Cheshire East take that same approach.
That's very much a shout out then, isn't it, to anybody from Cheshire East that's listening
Absolutely.
to this. Dare I say it, during this time of general elections, any councillor who is, or any political party, do you want to put something exciting in your manifesto at a local level in Cheshire East? What is it you can offer for the 1 in 4
I think
people?
That's it. Yeah, I agree.
Not at great cost, because it's probably about talking and designing.
Yeah.
And certainly that is far more cost effective than having to do retro work.
Absolutely.
When things go wrong.
I completely agree. I think this is where we're at the moment, is constantly trying to, as you say, retro work. We are constantly trying to sort of better up the mistakes rather than just getting it right the first time. And I've been reading various manifestos, and I've been very disappointed this time around with the lack of mentions of the disabled population, or the mentions in the manifestos are quite tokenistic. They're not really the real problems that people are facing. And I think if you got involved with people with lived experience, their manifestos would look very different. And I think that's what's important. It's about reaching out. I couldn't tell you, the lived experience of a man. That I would need to speak to a man, and I think it's about doing that with everybody.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
Absolutely does.
Just one other aspect of daily life, bus services.
So yeah, we were just discussing that actually in another meeting that we had. I actually don't take the bus. There's a lot of issues with the fact that the buses can only take certain size wheelchairs. So my wheelchair is actually slightly too long to go on the bus. So a bus is completely out of the question for me. And my chair's a very standard chair, it's not unusual. And a lot of people said, even with people who have visual impairment, they can't see the bus number as the bus comes up. So the buses need to know to stop, because they won't just stop for anybody, And so there is so many challenges with public transport. People said that the buses, they're not going far enough, they're not regular enough, sort of the evenings and weekends. They said, the services is terrible. And this was from the survey that we had. So yeah, a lot of people would like a big improvement on buses. As well, one of the bus companies didn't have any information about what size wheelchairs that needed to go on. So one of our group members wrote to them to sort of say, look, you need a policy so people can look online and look and say, okay, I can't go on your bus, or I can go on your bus, because without that we wouldn't know. As I said, my chair's a little bit too long, so I would wait at a bus stop just to be sent away. Well, nobody wants to be in that situation. So we need better advice online. People's websites, whether it's a business, the buses, anything, they need to have information about what accessibility there is, what reasonable adjustments that they can do for people.
It occurs to me that, and it's only a small detail, we don't have many bus shelters either, but bus shelters aren't like they used to be, but where we have got them, they're a roof, which is great, and a row of seats. Yeah. Or perching blocks, as I think they call them. Where's the space for the person in the wheelchair?
Exactly.
And ideally not on the end, because that's where they're going to get wet while they're waiting.
Absolutely. There is a real lack of thought. And I think a lot of this goes back to the building regulations. I know a number of architects who do accessible architecture, and they said that the regulations that the councils go by are so inadequate. They'll do things like they'll have a turning circle for a wheelchair of 1.50 meters. Well, my chair is that, so I couldn't use that, so they are almost designed for archaic chairs a long time ago, not for the bigger power chairs that people use today. So they're still using those regulations, but they're ineffective. I know my husband, he works in tool hire, and he rents out accessible toilets, and he actually looked into it, and the turning space, it's not big enough. So he's actually now telling people, you're trying to do the right thing by getting an accessible toilet for an event, but you're going to get somebody in a power wheelchair who then can't use your toilet but presumes they will. And it's little things like that. It's clearly being designed off old sort of regulations, not actual sort of lived experience.
I'm going to introduce a new word to many people on Congleton Radio. Ergonomics is the study of the design of spaces in relation to shape. That's the reason why your box of Kellogg's cornflakes gets 48 of them into the larger packing box in which they travel exactly. It's the reason that things fit in the back of your car. It's the way in which it's designed. But clearly there needs to be a sub-manual, or actually it ought to be part of the main manual, didn't it? That thinks about the impact of disability on design in all areas, whether it's shelves in supermarkets or...
Absolutely so, and I think that they could quite easily do that by talking to people with lived experience of the disabilities, rather than reading a book and thinking that then they are the experts, because it's very, very different.
I think we have a very clear call to action here from Deborah to anybody who is out there who is responsible for the public environment. And therefore, I am going to run a series of features. The number one reason for that is to give you the voice to tell people about what you are campaigning on, the issues that your members face in the Equal Access Advisory Group. What sort of features would be of most use to you?
I think it's raising public awareness is a really big thing. Even things like, the bins on the pavement, they are such a hazard to people, or the parking over drop curbs. I think a lot of people do these things and they're not trying to make something inaccessible. It's the fact that they've never even thought about it. I do think that people are lovely in Congleton. I think it's an especially nice town, and I think if people knew, I think they would be quite concerned that, I didn't realise that by me parking here has now blocked somebody from, and has made somebody travelling the road, which could get them knocked down, because, as I said, we're too low to be seen, really. So I think it's about making people realise what hazards there are, even down to sort of shops, things like that. One of the sort of the funny things that I often say is, you see a sticker in the window, if you need access, please come in and tell us. But there's a step there, it's little things that then they thought, well, I put a sticker there, if they need help, we'll come in, and it's like, but we can't come in to ask for a ramp because there's a step there. And it's little things like, installing a bell at a wheelchair accessible height, so somebody outside can just ring the bell and then they'll come, just little things that I think, unless you have lived experience of a condition, you haven't thought of. You're trying to do your best, but until you actually, and even years on now, I still come across things all the time that I think, I've never encountered that. How could that be made better? So really, it's giving a voice to people with lived experiences.
And on that subject, of course, something I think we must do in the features that we run is to get those voices talking about their lived experiences.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because again, that helps everybody. I wouldn't want anybody who's listening to this who is, let's call it, able-bodied, to go on a guilt trip.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely clear from what you've said that the number one thing is to raise awareness of what can be done. So if you're a shopkeeper, there's going to be a message in there for you.
Yeah.
If you are on the design team for Cheshire East Highways, there's going to be a message there for you.
Yeah.
If you are a motorist irritated because somebody is crossing the road rather slowly and you want to be get on and the lights have just gone to green, then it's for you.
Yeah.
It's a message for everybody to be caring in a sense. Now, caring is probably the wrong word.
Yeah, be kind.
Be considerate.
Yeah,
considerate
be aware.
And kind. Yeah. But also probably to assist.
Yeah.
Once we realise what the issues are, there's a need to do something about it. Otherwise, the issue remains.
Absolutely.
How could people do that, particularly within your group or assisting your campaign generally?
Well, I mean, obviously, listen to the series would be a really helpful thing. The council are publishing the minutes every time we have a meeting. There is also a email group that can get updates about the group's work. If you contact the council, Congleton Town Council, they will put you on a list. Mm-hmm. And yes, it's about talking to people with lived experiences. And as you said, it's doing what would help. It's ensuring that there is more thought when we park, things like that. Even there was a big issue with accessible parking bays in Congleton, so we've looked into that, and the problem is Cheshire East's, so the government recommends 6% of all parking spaces are accessible, and I think Cheshire East, it was something like 2%, even though we've got a higher amount of disabled people in Cheshire. So it's completely inadequate, and it's about understanding that, they may see that as an issue, but actually so many people then are can't park because, for example, I need a big van, so I can't go into a normal parking bay. That means we have to go home, and it's understanding things like that, all these different things a lot of people are doing them because they just don't think. You know, they'll park in an accessible bay, they'll park over a drop curb. They're not doing it maliciously, they're doing it because they're in a rush or they've got something else on their mind, you know. And I can absolutely say that because, you know, when I was a teen I was not malicious, but I didn't give it much thought. And now I look back and I think I really should have done, you know. Somebody should have, as I said, schools, different things like that, they could have helped us grow up and understand those problems. So I think as well, if it's more in the media, if it's being talked about, it becomes everybody's problem, you know, which is then we can all fix it, you know.
So that's what we are more than happy to do to help you share those issues. Let's get some people with experience to tell us of how that particular disability has changed their life and affects their life and the challenges that they have. I wonder also whether we might, through you, be able to arrange something in schools.
Yeah, I've not actually done any work in schools. It is something that I think is incredibly important. I'm actually releasing a children's book in August, so I will be then going into schools regarding it.
Debbie, when do you sleep?
Not very well, I don't do much sleep.
I don't sleep very well, therefore when I wake up I think, oh, what should
I do now? Yeah.
Okay.
But my book is about a little deer who's got wonky antlers and doesn't fit in, and it shows about the importance of inclusion and diversity for young children, because I think it's so important that the message starts right from word go. It starts when you're small, because then it just becomes normalised. It becomes something that it's no big deal, it's nothing, you know. So I think it is. I think it's absolutely approaching it from 2 to 100. You know, everybody needs to kind of learn, and
The name of the deer, it's not oh dear, is it?
It's not actually, no, Dams and the Deer.
Dams and the Deer.
Dams and the Deer, yeah.
No, that can't be bad. Listeners, I do hope you've enjoyed this interview, because the intention is that you should enjoy it. I do hope that it's started to inform you, and I do hope that you'll want to listen to the other features in the series that we're going to run, because it's very obvious to me that, not deliberately, but by an error of omission, the needs of the 1 in 4 people, which we probably have in the locality with some form of disability, are really not getting as fair a deal as they could, and not getting the consideration which they should, and we owe it to them. It's all part of the idea that Congleton is an inclusive town, fully inclusive. So thank you so very much for giving up your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for your inspiration.
Thank you.
Thank you for your commitment. And we look forward to the next feature.
Thank you, Vic.